Now, one thing we'll notice here, although this looks centered, but it's really not centered here, okay? Because we made this text a little bit bigger or larger. We resized it. It kind of lost that format which is desirable to put things in the middle of the screen. Okay? Now, the reason why this is as such is because if you look at this layout width, we're actually giving the layout width as a number. Okay, so whenever you put a number here, or rather whenever we put constraints, a number is added here. And of course, when we make this bigger or smaller, the number also changed there. So although that is necessary in many cases, sometimes we run into these issues where things are not quite organized in terms of centered vertically and horizontally. So if you click here to fix this problem easily, we can come down here. Remember, it's very contextual, meaning whatever we click here to the left, any of these widgets, then they will be highlighted, and so all the changes we make to the right in the attributes are going to pertain to that widget. So here we have this first widget, text view. If we change anything here, it's going to be for you have text widget. So what do we want to change here? Well, we want to change the way it looks. We want this to be always in the middle of the screen. Well, to make that, we can use an actual layout width that already is predefined for us. So if you open here, click this drop-down menu here, you will have this match constraint and this wrap content. Wrap content really means is that whatever we put inside this view or this widget in this case, it's always going to be wrapped, meaning it doesn't matter how big it is, it's always going to use as much space as it can. Okay, so if I say wrap, all of a sudden you see there we go. Now it's in the middle of the screen because it readjusts itself to say, well, it's wrap content, so I'm gonna make sure that I am centered and I only use what I need to use in terms of space. So now you can see it is indeed in the middle. If I do the same with this, I can come down here and say wrap content as well. And you can see now they're both in the middle. In fact, this looks a little bit tacky, so I'm going to get rid of the colons there. So in order for us to get rid of the colon there, I can go ahead down here to simplify. I'm going to go to our text here. In our text, you can see there is indeed this text attribute that we added and it says you have, and we can get rid of the colon there. Now, something else happens here. If you noticed, okay, there's a lot of different things that we're going to be introducing slowly, right? So once we understand these things that we're going to be building, actually going to be faster because we are still in the learning stages of how to create very simplistic applications using Android Studio. Now, if you hover over here, it's going to say hard-coded string you have should use @string resource. So this is something that it's also important to realize when we develop our Android applications. The main idea here is that we must always strive to compartmentalize our resources code from our UI, user interface, from also our Java or our logic, right? That way, it's easier to change one thing in one place as opposed to having to change one thing in all other places that we may have added that thing. Meaning, if I keep doing like this, adding hard-coded text, it's not very sustainable because every time, think about it, if the application gets bigger, larger, every time I want to come and change I have to find where my activity main XML is and come down here and make sure that this is the correct one and having to change it. And if somebody else says, you know what, instead of saying you have, let's just say you, and I have to come back. So you can see that's tedious and not very good code practice, because that just distracts us from actually being productive and makes us having to always hunt down things that we have written hard-coded. All right, there are places and time to do this, but Android says, you know, you can do this. As you can see, it's not an error, right? It's just a suggestion, a strong one that you should always listen to. So what is this saying here is that, well, you always have to move these texts or strings that you use in your user interface to a separate file called the string. In fact, if we come back to our project here, we're going to go to resources. There we go. And you can see we have values here. Instead of values, we have colors, we have strings, and have styles. They are all XML files. So if you go to strings, you notice that it has this string, it says app name and make it rain. We did not create, well, we actually did when we created the application. So I went ahead and create this string resource file that is now being used by our main activity internally to give the name to our application. So it's important to always come down here and add the actual strings that we want to use in our activity or in our application in general. Different ways to do this. We can come here, as I showed you, you open that. You can come here and actually open our less than sign here and start typing string. The moment you do that, you see there's two options, there's string and string array. We haven't talked about string array yet, but we want string. So if you hit enter, it goes ahead and gives us the option of adding a name. In this case, I'm going to say just title. And then I'm going to go ahead and close like that. The moment you do that, you notice that it allows us then to put what is the text that we want. So in this case, I can say you have. Okay, that's one way. Now, how do we take this title here? Because now this is the variable, if you will, that will point to the text you have to make it show here. But very simply, we just go ahead and come down here and say at, right? Because we are accessing something. String, and look at that. The moment you do that, it tells us all of the things that we have in our string XML resource. Right? We have app name that you saw earlier and the one that we just added just now. Hit enter and voila, you can see now we have you have. But the difference here is that it's no longer coming directly from here. Notice it says add string. This just says, well, we are accessing string values in our resources and get the title which we created, this name title, and just gives us the you have. That is one way to do this. The faster way, sometimes, I'm going to get rid of this. Get rid of that, I'm going to have a problem here. So I'm going to just get rid of this as well. I'm going to say you have, so put it back as it was. You have like that. The other way to do this is very simple. I can come, in fact, let's come down here. I can come to design here. I'm going to look at component tree. Open that. You can see now we have that component tree layout as we talked about, right? So everything, every widget that we've added into our user face, it's now showing here. Let's make it a little bit bigger there. Right, there it is. Now, you notice we also have this sort of warning that says hardcode string you have should be add string resource, right? So it's telling us, hey, yes, this is fine. It will always work, but it's not a good thing to do this because you're going to run into issues later on. Meaning we can now click on this and gives us more information, right? It tells us all these things and gives us the way to actually fix it. It says fix extract string resource, meaning just take that and put into a string. Click on fix like that. Notice it pops up this extract resource for us. It gives us a resource name. We didn't have to type this, but we can change if you want. I can change this to title and resource value. Remember, it's going to be you have, and everything is going to be inside of a string.xml. If you click like that, okay, and it's all done, but we still have other ones, right? Click those two, come down here, fix. I'm going to say this money value. There's the text for now. It's going to be on strings XML. Say OK. And I can continue. And it says also for the button, we have to do the same thing. Click here. I'm going to say button. That's fine. I can change the value I want. I'm going to say make it rain. And I say OK. And notice now everything is as we should have. And no longer we have these warnings that we had before, and everything is wonderful. Okay, and if you go back to our strings here, notice everything now is added for us. So those are different ways to add string resources so that you don't add them or hard code them in our XML here. It's a big no-no. Again, it works fine, but it's always a good habit to put everything inside of that string when it pertains to text or strings. All right, very good. There it is. So now if we save this, let's go see how this will look now. It should look different than that a little bit because everything now is nicely aligned and make it rain. Nothing is happening yet, but at least we know things are working. Very good. The other thing I'm going to add right now here, in fact, I'm going to do it using an actual XML text here. I'm going to come at the bottom here. Look, let me close this so we have more space. Remember, I need to be outside of this button here because we're going to create another button. Down here, I'm going to say button. So open there. I'm going to say button. So click. I'm going to make it wrap content. Wrap content. I'm going to give it an ID because all of them have ID. You just type ID. Hit enter. Hit the first enter there, the plus ID, because that means an ID that we put here is going to be the one we're going to be able to invoke in our Java code. And then I'm going to say something like show tag like this. Okay, very good. So now you can see there is the button there. Notice there's no constraints, and I can add all those constraints if I want also here. So we can use both of these views interchangeably. Now, so what I'm going to do here, I'm going to add some sort of text inside, right? Now, here's the thing. I have not created the actual string, like we said before, to add the name for our button here, okay? So I'm going to say, click that, add string, but it's not going to be title because we don't want it to say you have, right? That's not what we want. We want something else. In this case here, it's going to be show tag like that. We're going to have an issue here because it's not resolving inside of a string. There's no such thing as show tag, but we're going to create it. So click here, it says here create value resource show tag. Click that, and resource value, I want it to say what? Well, I want it to say show tag. Hit enter, and all of a sudden you see show tag is there. And if you go to a string, look at this, show tag is there. Winning, right? Very good. So it's not that hard. Very good. So now I can even bring this down here if I wanted to and add the constraint. I want it to be at the bottom there. I can make it, perhaps make it there. And I want it to also constrain to the left and constrain to the left, to the right, I say. And as I do that, you can see these are being added. All of these attributes for our button have been added automatically for us. Look how wonderful this is, right? Very good. So if you save again, we should see a button at the bottom as well. Now, the reason why you don't see this button here is because we have an issue. This is too much at the bottom, so we probably should put it a little bit over there. We'll talk more about understanding where things are on our screen depending on device. There we go. Now that we moved a little bit up there, it's showing very good there. Okay, show tag, and we have make it rain. All right, congratulations. So we were able to put together this nice, easy to follow user interface here. So we've learned a few things. Most important thing here is that every time we want to add a string, meaning any text that we want to put inside of our user interface here, it's not a good idea. We should not put directly inside of our text attribute, right? Just hard coding here is not going to do it. So you must always, as I showed you, put everything inside of our string. Very good. I'll see you in the next video.